all, we're here to support you, the environmental commissions across the state. So please, if you have any questions, need any resources, reach out to us. Best way to reach us is through our email, info@njec.org, as we are still, all of us primarily working from home and are not in the office on a daily basis. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all of our webinars and trainings can be viewed on our YouTube channel, NJDEP Views. So just a few housekeeping issues before we get into the meat of our program. This session is being recorded and will be available afterwards to all registrants. If you could, please change your caption in your to your full name and municipality. You can simply do this by hovering your mouse over your picture. There should be 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner with that shows a pull-down menu where it tells you where you can change your name. Today's session is exactly the same training that's going to be presented on Tuesday. So you don't necessarily need to log in for Tuesday's session unless you want to listen to the presentation a second time. On the other hand, if it's still too early in the morning on a Saturday, you might fall back into bed, you can certainly do that and log in on Tuesday to hear this presentation. That's totally up to you. Please put all your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end of our presentations today. So for today, we're actually having 3 presentations, as Liz mentioned. I will be doing the land use, master plan, and ordinance section. This will be followed by Dr. Chris Abrupta talking about green infrastructure, and followed by Dr. Steve Sousa, who will be talking about stormwater utilities. So, land use planning. Every town has documents and regulations that govern your municipal development. And in a perfect world, the planning should begin with your environmental resource inventory, which to know your town's resources. This is your roadmap to visioning future development, which is then elaborated in your master plan, your zoning maps, and guides the development of ordinances for your whole town and for each zone use. Last session, we discussed the development of ERIs, and today's training will focus on the role ECs have in the master plan and land use ordinance development. Starting next Saturday will be our last sessions, which we'll be talking about site plan and site plan review. New Jersey is ruled by home rule, which means the state has delegated land use powers to municipalities with some exceptions. And it is the municipal land use law under NJSA Title 40, Chapter 55D that serves as the guiding document to understand New Jersey's municipal land use powers. It covers the master plan, zoning, powers and responsibilities of the zoning board and planning board members, and land use ordinances. The purpose of the municipal land use law is to encourage municipal action to guide appropriate use of or development in a manner that promotes public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. The New Jersey Planning Officials publishes the MLUL as a booklet every year with updated information, and this can be purchased from them, or you can simply look up the MLUL online. Your master plan is your vision for your community, setting the framework for your local land use. Where are your industrial sites? Where are your businesses, open space, housing, etc.? And your ERI should be used to plan for the zoning, as it already maps where your steep slopes are, your streams, flood zones. It identifies where development should and should not be. This is just the basics of a master plan. It has to be adopted by the planning board, guides your future land use, establishes your goals and policies, and it must be re-examined every 10 years as dictated by law. Sometimes townships might look at it more frequently if they determine something needs to be adjusted in their master plan. An environmental commission should be involved in the master planning so that the town's natural resources are protected, which brings us to our first poll question. Is your environmental commission actively involved during the master plan review? Liz, if you can run that poll. If people can answer, yes, no, do not know. The answers are piling in. We're about halfway there. You're About it's slowing down a little bit, but we still about 76% voted. I'll give it just another minute. Looks like some people don't want to register their opinions here. There we go. But we're about 80% have done it. So if you end up polling, and it looks like we're, almost tied there for people saying yes, and people just don't know if they're involved or not. You definitely should be involved in your planning of master planning re-examination of your environmental conditions. So, reach out to your township and make sure that you are involved in this process. Okay, let's continue. If my slide was advanced, there we go. The master plan itself, there's really only 4 required elements. You need a statement of purpose, how it relates to other plans, perhaps your stormwater management plan, which may or may not be actually part of your master plan. It may exist as a separate plan, the land use element and the housing element. And ECs should play a critical role in updating the land use element. And there are a number of optional elements that are important to ECs that may be part of your master plan. They include the conservation element, perhaps an open space and recreation plan, green building sustainability planning, farmland preservation, or a climate change adaptation plan. And if your municipality is interested in trying to adapt a climate change adoption plan, I strongly suggest looking at what Princeton has done in their Princeton Climate Action Plan, because it's extremely comprehensive, and it's a good resource to look at if you're trying to do something similar in your own community. What role do the commissioners play? Well, one thing, they can help shape the conservation plan elements, as mentioned. Remember, planning board members, they typically do not have an overall understanding of environmental factors and impacts on natural resources when evaluating land use applications. And by explaining these factors to the planning board, they can then be considered and incorporated into your conservation plan element during the master plan review. And you can encourage your township to consider additional elements, as I already mentioned, such as green building and environmental sustainability plan elements. The land use elements. It basically just describes the land use in relationship to natural features such as topography, soils, geology, groundwater, recharge, streams, floodplains, wetland, and woodlands. Features that are already found in your environmental resource inventory. And it also maps existing and proposed development in relationship to current and proposed zoning ordinances, and recommends the standards for developing the development densities. Based on the municipal land use law, there are certain required elements that need to be part of the land use element. If your town has not done a recent master plan re-examination, there are some updated requirements that need to be incorporated into this element. In 2018, legislation was passed requiring at a minimum to include a statement of strategy concerning sustainability and resilience in the land use element. The statement should address smart growth, including consideration of potential locations of electric vehicle charging stations, a storm resilience with respect to energy supply, flood-prone areas, environmental infrastructure, and environmental sustainability. Very recently, just this year, a law now requires that there is a climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment as part of your land use plan. This assessment should be conducted in consideration of environmental effects associated with climate change, extreme weather related events like temperature, drought, sea level rise. And it also needs to contain measures that will be taken to mitigate anticipated natural hazards resulting from climate change. So now municipalities must identify critical facilities such as roads and utilities that might be affected by hurricanes or sea level rise, make plans to sustain normal life in face of anticipated natural hazards, and integrate climate vulnerability with existing plans such as your emergency management or flood hazard strategies. NJDEP will be developing a guidance for what this climate change related vulnerability assessment should look like and how the environmental commissions can engage effectively. One interesting part of the law actually requires that the DEP, upon request by a planning board, will provide technical assistance to a municipality preparing a climate change vulnerability assessment. Next up, ordinances. While your zoning map says where each type of the development may occur, it's your land use ordinances that say how the development needs to occur. The laws that govern development, the height of your buildings, setback from roads, stream buffers, homes per acre, apartment buildings, etc. You know, if you think about like business lines in towns, how big are they? How many are there? All of this information should be in your land use ordinances. And environmental commissions can play a role in updating these ordinances to make sure they're compliant with the state's regulation. And you also can recommend more stringent local ordinances above and beyond what the state requires in most instances. The Environmental Commission, remember, you have a liaison to the planning board who has full voting rights. So recommendations for master plan revisions, ordinances, and zoning can be through this liaison. So now we have a open-ended question for you. What local ordinances would you like to see adopted or amended in your own municipality? Please use the chat to respond just with the name of the ordinance and the name of your municipality. I just have listed here some example ordinances that you might be considering, but this is not an all-inclusive list. So if you can please answer just one answer per person, because we have a number of people on the call today, on the program today. And if someone would just let me know when that, if someone can just start talking about some of the things that people are saying, since I can't see the chat, that would be great.
Sure. So we have Evesham is native species, Glenrock tree protection, Bernardsville renewable energy, Princeton renewable energy, native plants Evesham, leaf blower. I'm not sure for which town. I think that's Melbourne. Yes. Florham Park. Let's see. This is all going really fast. Just a minute. Florham Park renewable energy, native species Hopewell, water conservation in Chatham Township, stream buffer ordinance in Pittman. Native species in Galway, some more renewable energy, Mount Olive, native species in Alamuchi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Native species in Roosevelt, enhanced stormwater management, East Amwell, water conservation, Waldwick, some more renewable energy in Bernards and Verona, Lawrence, Mercer County, native species.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of
water conservation,
stormwater, native species ordinances. That's great. And and remember that here at NJDEP we do have a lot of sample ordinances that we can provide you if you need some guidance in developing these for your township. But that's wonderful, and we'll make the chat available there so we can see what everybody's working on in their different communities.
Well, I'd also like to mention quickly that for the leaf blower ordinances, there's a working group that's working on that. So if you're in a municipality that's interested in being involved, just let us know, like write to info@njec.org, and I'll put you in contact with that group.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that.
So that's it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sheila. Environmental commissions, what is your process in the ordinance, developing ordinances? As I already mentioned, you can advise your municipality on updating and drafting environmental ordinances in town. You can advocate for new ordinance. For example, this actually fits in with some of the comments of ordinance that people wanted to install, because you could, as an EC member, you may recommend native plantings for a new subdivision, but your applicant only has to abide by what the municipal ordinance actually is in existence. So if you want to require use of only native species with developments, certainly have your township pass a native plant ordinance. Remember that your municipal ordinance, as I said, can be stricter than the state law under most cases, unless the regulations are at the state level, like the Wetland Act or the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. And your work at the local level is extremely important. It's very instrumental, and it does influence what happens at the state level. When the state stalled on banning plastic bans, it was the municipalities, specifically the environmental commissions, that themselves took it upon themselves to act locally and pass their own ordinances. And after 120 local ordinances were enacted, the state Senate finally put forward and passed the bill, which went on to the Assembly and then signed into law by Governor Murphy. So it was the continued actions at the municipal level that put pressure on the state to move this legislation along. And we really appreciate all the hard work that you've been doing in regards to this effort. Your land use elements now needs to include required climate change vulnerability assessments along with mitigation strategies. So what types of ordinances might you need to adapt or change in response to this assessment or in response to climate change in general? And here I've just listed a number of things that you probably should be looking at. Make sure your development is away from hazards such as flooding and erosion, which is an obvious thing. Promote open space preservation. Look at clustering in your development. Exceed the existing stormwater regulations. Promote natural recharge. Utilize low impact development techniques. Revise your building codes to allow green roofs or solar panels. Ensure that ordinances require basic design elements such as your building orientation and landscape design to work in concert with the natural environment. And there is plenty more to come. Under New Jersey Protecting Against Climate Threats, the DEP is utilizing data models to reform the state's environmental land use rules, such as the freshwater wetland rules, to better plan and build resilient communities by avoiding flood-prone areas, reestablishing chronically inundated wetlands, revegetating riparian buffers, encouraging green building and green infrastructure. And we expect these new rules to be released sometime this spring of 2021. They will then be open for public comments and adopted a year after they were introduced. And NJDEP staff is currently serving on the DEP stakeholder groups to help guide the writing of these rules. As you should all be aware of by now, the first major rule change that has been enacted already is the new stormwater management rule, which now requires green infrastructure as part of new major developments. Your municipality should have already adopted its own new ordinance, either using the model DEP ordinance or an enhanced ordinance that goes beyond the minimum. And with that, I'm going to be turning the baton over to Chris Abrupta to continue our conversation about green infrastructure practices and how they can be incorporated into your master plan and ordinances and other ordinances. And here again is just our contact information, and I will stop sharing my screen. And Chris, you will be up next, giving our next presentation. Chris?
Let me share my screen here. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Okay. Oops. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so this is me, Chris Abrupta. I'm with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. This is my email address. It'll also be at the bottom of the presentation at the last slide. So if you don't catch it now, I'm sure you'll be able to catch it later. So I'm going to talk today about green infrastructure. And these are some examples of green infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is. So green infrastructure really is it's really not a new approach to stormwater management. It's more of a new name for stormwater management. So it's really trying to capture the stormwater at its source, hold it, infiltrate it into the ground, reuse it wherever we can. So it results in much smaller practices that are incorporated into the landscape or throughout the entire development. So currently what we have in development in New Jersey is you build a 50-acre subdivision, and at the bottom of the hill, you put a 1-acre detention basin. That's going to be a thing of the past. What they want us to do now with green infrastructure and new development is, instead of having one detention basin to treat all 50 acres, you're going to have one practice for every 2.5 acres. So you will have practices, stormwater practices scattered throughout the entire development. Okay, and that becomes a big piece about what they're trying to push forward with these new regulations. Okay, so green infrastructure is designed to infiltrate stormwater, filter stormwater, in some cases just to store it, either to reuse it or to let it out slowly over time, to evaporate stormwater, and also to transpire stormwater. So transpiration is really plants are releasing water through their leaves back into the atmosphere. It's very much like people perspire, plants transpire. So they release water through the leaves. So these are a bunch of different green infrastructure practices here, bioretention systems, and there's a few different types. The rain garden is most well recognized. Bioswale, stormwater planters, curb extensions, tree filter box. And we'll go through each of these. I'll show you some slides of what they look like. Permeable pavement, rainwater harvesting, dry wells, there's rooftop systems, there's infiltration basins and sand filters. So these are the systems that, we're talking about now as we talk about green infrastructure. So the bioretention, we have these different types of systems, and I'll show you each one. Rain garden. So rain garden is very simply a shallow landscape depression. It's designed to capture the first inch or two of rain. It fills up at about 6 to 12 inches of water. So there's about 12 inches of ponding in this, and then over time, it slowly infiltrates into the ground. So within 24 hours, this becomes dry. They're usually planted with native plants and adapted into the existing landscape. So this is a cross section of one. You can see we actually have a bioretention soil mix or a rain garden soil mix in the bottom, which is a mix of about 70% sand and about 30% compost. And that's to encourage water to infiltrate into the ground. You see there's a ponding depth there, and the idea is it just fills up with water and slowly percolates into the ground. Here's a bunch of different pictures of rain gardens. The one in the upper left-hand corner was done at the Subaru dealership in our Subaru headquarters when it was in Cherry Hill. They built it into the parking lot island. The one in the center was built in Skillman and Bloomberg's facility, and you see all the people came out and helped us build that. The one in the upper right was built at a school, and kids were helping plant it. The one in the center is actually an abandoned gas station in Camden. And we actually put 4 rain gardens on this site, and this is now the gateway to the southern ward of Camden. Okay, and you can see this is actually one picture of that. I like this picture because it shows how you're getting water from the road into the rain garden. Okay, and it's going under the sidewalk through this trench drain up in the top corner here. So that's the biggest concern is, well, how do I get water from the road into the garden? Well, this is one way, and actually works very, very effectively. Okay, and that trench drain is designed so you can ride a bicycle over it, and you can walk over it, and no one's going to get hurt. Okay, here's one at the school. We used the existing catch basin, and we built it around that. So when it fills up with 6 inches of water, the water will slowly percolate in the ground. When it gets a little deeper, the overflow will go into this drain and go out to where it was going before. Okay, here's one at the library. Another really nice system. You can see lots of plants, pollinator habitat, a beautiful multi-stem river birch tree in it. Can be really gorgeous, but also very effective. So a bioswale is very similar to rain garden, except the word swale is a nice word for ditch, and bio is the word for life. So it's a ditch with life in it. So the idea is it has plants in it and water's moving from one location to another. So swale is meant to convey water from one spot to another as a pipe would. So the idea is water is going to go into this and travel through it. As it's traveling through it, the plants are filtering out the pollution. Some water is getting infiltrated into the ground, and it becomes a much healthier system for the community. It also saves money because it's a lot cheaper to build this than it is to install concrete piping and catch basins. Okay, and you can see here some along the sides of roads. Some very nice pictures here. Stormwater plant is another variant on this, except this is actually built into the sidewalk with a little concrete around it. So basically it's a rain garden built in a concrete box. It's taking runoff from the sidewalk, runoff from the road. And once again, it's designed to capture the water and let it slowly percolate into the ground. Here's one that was built. You can see here they have, once again, they have those trench drains to get the water from the road into here. So these grates, and they also have water coming from the sidewalk into here. And they have a nice area where people can get out of their car and stand so they don't fall into it. Now, a lot of times these things will have little fences around them, about 2-3 foot high, little black fences, because apparently when people text on their phone, they don't watch where they're walking and they could fall in here and hurt themselves. So we make sure that when they do fall in here, at least they hurt themselves on the fence too as they're going in, and maybe they'll learn not to text in the future while they walk. So it's a big educational thing. You can see here's another one here. Another variant on this is curb extensions. We're actually bumping the rain garden out into the road. Okay, so here the water is traveling along the curb, goes into this opening and then goes into this area here. And this will fill up with water and it'll slowly percolate in the ground. And once this is filled, any excess water will continue to go on and go to the drain at the corner. What's nice about this is not only does it treat stormwater, it also calms traffic, right? So in wide roads, we can put these in to slow traffic down. We also can use these to protect pedestrians. You can see the people standing on the corner. If there was a car parked where this curb extension was, what would happen is people wouldn't be able to see cars coming, and they could walk out on the street and they could actually get hit. So that's a problem. Okay, permeable pavements, the next one we want to talk about. All different types of permeable pavement. So the asphalt that we use on our roads and our parking lots, and the concrete we use on our driveways and the sidewalks are all an impermeable material, so water can't pass through it. There is a permeable pavement, so we do have in this picture porous asphalt. So the idea, it's regular asphalt without the fine material, so water passes right through the asphalt and goes into the stone layer underneath and is allowed to slowly percolate into the ground. We have a nice picture of a bunch of different types of systems here. There's porous asphalt, there's pervious concrete. You can see the fellow holding his hand in the right-hand corner, his water is passing right through it. And then there's these grass pavers, and we also have these interlocking paving stones that allows water to pass between the stones into the ground. I like this picture because it shows you kind of how it works. That stone layer under the asphalt, the porous asphalt, can be as thick as you want it to be. If you only want to hold a little bit of water in there, maybe it's only 6 inches thick. You want to hold a lot of water in there, it's 2 feet thick. So it's a very coarse stone. It's angular stone, so there's lots of void space. So it's has a 40% porosity. So for every 2.5 gallons of stone, you can hold about 1 gallon of water. And that's kind of how we look at this. What's nice about it is it breathes. So air passes through it, so it doesn't heat up as much. So it helps with the heat island effect. As water's passing through the stone, it's getting cleaner and cleaner as it's making its way to the groundwater table. Very similar to like a Brita filter on a faucet. It's filtering out that water, okay? The other nice thing about this is that, and this is an example of porous asphalt parking lot. You can see only the parking spaces are porous. The cartway where people drive in is regular asphalt, but that flows onto the parking spaces and goes into the ground. What's nice about this is when you plow this and you put all the snow up in the corner, and as that snow is melting, it trickles down across the asphalt and usually will flash freeze. That water will flash freeze at night, creating a black ice situation where people would slip and fall and get hurt. That doesn't happen with this, because what happens if that snow melts, it hits that porous asphalt, it goes right through the asphalt into the stone layer, so you don't get that flash freezing. And you also, so you're protecting people, you're reducing your liability. So it's a really nice system for that. Here's an example of pervious concrete on the sidewalk in Camden that we had done. Here's some permeable pavers. This is for the rich people. Somebody here from Princeton on the phone, so the Princeton stuff would do this, I guess. This is a great system, but it's very expensive compared to the other ones. Okay, so so I joke about the cost of it, but if you can afford this, it's a really nice system, and water passes through it. There's a stone layer, you know, underneath it, and through all those cracks between the blocks. It's great permeability. This is one of my favorite. This is actually turf stone here. It's a brand name of this one. It's a grass paver. So those are 1 foot by 2 foot concrete blocks with diamonds in them, cut out of them, so that water can pass right through that diamond where the grass is growing into a stone layer and go into the ground. What I like about this is it's great for overflow parking, soccer fields. This is an emergency access road behind a public works building. So this is something you can drive a fire truck on and it's fine, you can hold it up. But it also does a great job of infiltrating. The only thing people don't like about this is when women wear heels, their heels can get stuck in the grass, and it gets annoying. But I don't think you should be wearing your heels to the soccer field anyway, so you should be fine with that. But so this is kind of really a nice system for overflow parking. You know, even some of those church parking lots where, you know, they have a couple big days at church, Christmas and Easter, and you have those big overflow parking lots. So maybe this would be good for those parking lots too. We harvest a lot of rainwater with green infrastructure. So capturing the water, getting it to infiltrate into the ground. So this is what we would call a cistern. So we have built one here in a vacant lot to collect water for a community garden. Here's another one that we had done in Patterson. Here's a slimline one that's only about 24 inches thick. sits right up against the wall. That'll hold about 530 gallons, a really nice cistern. One of the other practices we see a lot of are green roofs. Now, green roofs are great. It's hard to go into an existing building and retrofit it with a green roof because you have to worry about the structural integrity. These roofs tend to be very heavy. They can weigh anywhere between 15 to 35 pounds per square foot. And you can see there's two different types here, the extensive and intensive. Difference in them is the weight in most cases. So this is great practices for new buildings. The green roof can only hold about a ½ inch of water, where most of the other systems can hold several inches of water, but it's still a really nice system where you have no other place to put stormwater management. And then we also have blue roofs, which is basically a green roof without the vegetation. So the idea is we're going to pond water up on our rooftop, hold the water there, and let it evaporate over time. Okay. A lot of facility guys don't like this. They don't want to pond water on the roof, but it has been shown to be very safe, a very nice system. Green roofs have been used throughout Europe for many years, 30 or 40 years in Germany, and they tend to last a lot longer. Typical roof, flat roof, you have to tar it and retar it every 5 to 7 years. A green roof will last 20 to 25 years without any required pulling it out and maintaining it. Because that the vegetation, the soil insulates the roof, so you don't have the cracking of the membrane that's on the roof that would normally be under the tar. So these are really nice systems if you're going to be in a building for a long time. The other thing that we have are these infiltration systems. You see a lot of these along the parkway, so basically the water runs off the parkway, goes into this system. It's got sand in the bottom, and then it slowly percolates into the ground. I don't really care for these because I think they look hideous. The other thing with the sand is that sand can clog up over time. So you have to make sure there's a really good maintenance plan for that, because you have to rake it out and clean that out to make sure that sand continues to infiltrate, because it'll build up a biofilm on top and it'll stop the infiltration. So this is something that it works very well when it's being taken care of and being maintained. So if a developer comes in with this, you want to make sure they have a strong maintenance plan and they understand they have to clean that sand and rake it out every once in a while. And then here's a bigger system, the same kind of thing, but this is holding the larger storm. So it's kind of incorporated into that detention basin look. Okay. And then we have some here, more of an infiltration system here where you have the sand filter, but you have grass on top of it. So these are another ones that we can see. Same kind of thing. One has grass on top, one does not. So one's a sand filter and one's an infiltration system. So they work very well, but they do need to be maintained. So the bigger part of this I wanted to talk about really briefly is what you should be doing as a town with your master plan. And I think one thing that we've been trying to do is encourage people to incorporate green infrastructure into their master plan, proposing to go in and retrofit existing developed areas with green infrastructure practices. So green infrastructure is a really nice tool. So if you have a development that was built in the 70s and has no stormwater management and there's a lot of impervious cover, it's great. We can go in there and put in rain gardens. We can do some pervious pavement, and we can actually really reduce the amount of runoff from that development by installing green infrastructure. So we'd like to see people add this kind of master plan to go through a development, assess where there's flooding, and try to figure out if they can put in some of the green infrastructure practices. So we do green infrastructure feasibility studies. This is one we had done for Evesham. So we had identified 18 sites here, each in different sub watersheds throughout the town. For each site, we have a figure that shows where we're recommending rain gardens. So in this case, it's the Marlton Elementary School. We've identified 4 spots for rain gardens. We identified 2 spots for some porous pavement. You can see the blue lines are the drainage areas to those systems, okay? And here we call the rain gardens a spa retention system. So it's a rain garden is just a common name for it. And then we could show some information. We have some information sheet on the school, how much impervious cover there is, how much total phosphorus, total nitrogen, and total suspended solids wash off that property. And when we put in our bioretention systems, how much water it can actually manage, okay, and how much it would cost. So in this case, we have 4,950 square feet of rain gardens we would install, which would be those 4 rain gardens I showed you on the previous slide, and an estimated cost of what that would take. Okay, and then we show some pictures here, like a before picture, and then we have our landscape architects rendered up as an after picture. right? So you can actually see how beautiful it can look over time. And I'm not sure why we don't convert all our traffic islands, all our parking lot islands into these systems. It would be really nice if we could do that. And then, we have a web map too. So if you live in Evesham, you can go to our website and you can see all 18 sites on the web map. You can click on one of those, photograph of the site would pop up, and you click on download report, and that report would be those 2 sheets that I just showed you, okay? And this is great because if you have Boy Scouts who want Eagle projects or Girl Scouts who want Gold Award projects, you say, hey, listen, go to the web map. Maybe your church is in here, maybe your school is in here, maybe you can do a rain garden at one of those sites, okay? So this is my contact information. Water Extension does a lot of work with towns and nonprofit organizations. We help them with watershed restoration protection plans. We do these green infrastructure feasibility studies. We've been doing rain garden rebate programs. We run a green infrastructure champion program. So you want to learn more about green infrastructure every other Friday. Actually, yesterday was our 5th class, but every other Friday, we have a 2-hour class on Friday morning, and you can learn about different aspects of green infrastructure. If you take 5 of the classes, we give you a certificate that you're a champion, and we want to work with you, try to help you bring green infrastructure into your town. And we help people with grant writing. If you're going to send me an email, I encourage you to copy Holly on the email, because I get about 120 emails a day, and sometimes I miss a few. And Holly will walk down the hall, smack me in the head, and say, hey, did you get back from this guy from Princeton? He really wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, we'll sit down and we'll craft a response to your email. So that's really, really important. Did I hit my time, Randy, or did I go over? Well, I can't hear you because you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. I was looking at something else. Yeah, no, I think we're good. I think now we can, we're pretty much on time, maybe a couple minutes over, but that probably was my fault. Anyways, we'll go on now to Steve Sousa. Sousa, if you want to share your screen and start talking about stormwater utilities, that'd be great. Unmute yourself too.
Okay, there we go. All right. So yeah, Randy, thank you. And Chris, thank you very much for talking about green infrastructure, because that's definitely part and parcel of what I'll be talking about. So everybody can see my screen fine right now? We all okay?
Yes.
I don't,
No, I don't see
I'm
your
not seeing it.
Okay, hold on then. Let me start over again. There we go. Okay.
Got it. Good now.
Yep, having been doing this for like over a year, I should have this down. So let's get going. All right. So again, Chris, thanks for talking about green infrastructure. Like I said, that's going to be part and parcel of what I'll be talking about. I'm Steve Sousa. I'm actually on the NJDEP Board of Trustees. A lot of you may know me in my former life as the president of Princeton Hydro. I'm retired, semi-retired, and the owner of Clean Waters Consulting, which is me alone. But we're going to talk about stormwater utilities. So first off, yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to admit this is a really touchy subject. I think, unfortunately, like a lot of other things, some of this has to do with the fact that this has been politicized. But there's really nothing to fear when we talk about stormwater utilities. It's actually something that's beneficial to communities. The legislation was passed into law 2 years ago now, March of 2019, and formally called the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act. And essentially what it does is it enables a municipality or a county government, or maybe even a combination of municipal governments, like a co-op of sorts, to create a utility specifically for the management, maintenance, and upkeep of both green and gray stormwater infrastructure. So this not only involves the management and maintenance of green infrastructure, but conventional stormwater management systems, which are referred to as gray infrastructure. So your typical curb and gutter, detention basin, catch basins, culverts, conduits, etc. This is nothing new. New Jersey is actually the 41st state to enact the stormwater utility legislation. So, we jumped on this bandwagon a lot later than a lot of other states in the country. And I adapted this from New Jersey Future, provided you with a link if you want to get into this a little bit in more detail. But you can see that as of 2019, okay, there were about 1,700 stormwater utilities throughout the US. You can see this is both in blue and red states throughout the country. And so this, like I said, it's nothing new. There are stormwater utilities that have been in effect in some of these states for multiple years. I think in Texas, dating back almost 10 years now in some cases, if not more. So yeah, this is what you typically hear. Oh, just what we need, another tax. But this is really true. It is a fee, but the fee, and I'm quoting directly from the law, the fee must be based on a fair and equitable approximation of the proportionate contribution of stormwater runoff from a real property. Okay, that's a lot of words there, but essentially what it means is that however this fee is assessed, it really needs to reflect the amount of impervious cover that is on your property, whether it's a private property, a commercial property, a public property. And through this fee, we're generating the revenue that must be used. It can't be sort of like thrown into some other sort of like, a slush fund. It has to be used to implement and maintain stormwater infrastructure. And there's a lot of communal benefits that come out of the proper management and maintenance of stormwater features. We have better flood control, and I think everybody can relate to that. And so, having sat on an EC myself, I think this is one of the really strong talking points that environmental commissions can use. Flood control. Everybody can relate to flood control. And as I'll emphasize, it's not just flood control during a 100-year storm, these big cataclysmic storms that we get, hurricanes or whatever. It's these smaller nuisance flooding events that I'll get to, in a few minutes. And then we all want cleaner water. I mean, we want to recreate in clean water. We want clean drinking water. We want less harmful algae blooms, HABs. Everybody saw what happened a couple of years ago with, Lake Apatcon, Greenwood Lake being closed to recreational use because of harmful algae blooms. That all translates back to poorly managed stormwater runoff, a large amount of nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen getting into our waterways, and that leads to algae blooms. And we also want healthier aquatic environments. Again, what does that translate to? The ability to go out and fish and swim in our waterways. And so these are communal benefits that really come out of better stormwater management. A lot of you have probably seen, a slide like this, but essentially what this shows you is how, as we develop our watersheds, we end up generating more runoff. And so if you kind of look at where my cursor is here, in a moderately developed, this doesn't mean to be, like just all forested, we get about 10% runoff, but you can see the majority of the precipitation that does fall either soaks back down into the ground or is lost by evapotranspiration. Very little of that runs off. When we start to develop our watersheds, that equation gets flipped. You can see here, we're now of the total amount of precipitation we're experiencing, about 55% of that actually runs off. And this doesn't occur just in towns or cities that have been developed where you have 70% impervious cover. You start to see this at about 10 to 15% impervious cover. And that translates to low density residential, large lot development. One house per couple of acres is about 10 to 15% impervious cover. So you start to see these problems with a minimal amount of development. And the bottom line, the more runoff you get, the more flooding, the more pollutants, the more ecological damages, and those losses of ecological services, which means the benefits that the environment provide to society, swimming, fishing, clean drinking water. Chris usually brings this point up in his presentations, but he'll tell you that even with all of the new measures that we've put into place through some of the more recently promulgated stormwater regulations, about 80% of our stormwater related problems will remain unchecked. So we'll still have about 80% of the problems that we have now, even with the implementation of green infrastructure through the updated stormwater regs that went into effect this month, as well as some of the other regulations that have been on the books since 2002, 2004. So in any event, the problem here is that as we develop our watersheds, we end up with more runoff. And as I mentioned, what resonates, I think, with communities, with public works personnel, with mayors and governing committees, is that these nuisance flooding events that are caused by these smaller, more frequently occurring storms. When we talk about the one-year storm, a lot of civil engineers will poo-poo the one-year storm, saying, okay, big deal, it's the one-year event. Well, that's 2.75 inches over 24 hours. That's still a significant amount of rainfall. And even the smaller events that occur, like an inch of rain, an inch and a half of rain, just think about how common, when we get a forecast of an inch of rain or an inch and a half of rain, how common we see flooding events. And those flooding events I call nuisance flooding because they are associated with these more smaller storm events. But again, proper stormwater management, particularly green infrastructure, helps alleviate a lot of these problems. But as Chris mentioned, these stormwater management facilities, green infrastructure, are only as good as they're maintained. You can build them as well as you can, but unless they're maintained, they're not going to do the job they need to do over time. So the challenges of stormwater management, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, and I hear it all the time. It's always summed up that we don't have enough money to meet these unfunded mandates. This is a common, theme with public works personnel and with mayors and, county government people. And because of that, because there's not enough money to meet these quote unquote unfunded mandates, we have a lack of compliance with MS4, the municipal separate storm sewer regulations. We're not satisfying all of our TMDLs, the total maximum daily loads. Some of those have been on the books since 2002. We have watershed plans that have been in place for now almost 2 decades, if not more. We still have a whole bunch of water bodies that are on the state's, let's call it the polluted list, the 303D list. And so they never get delisted because there's no money available to put into effect the stormwater management measures that need to be implemented. And we're losing our ability to have the resiliency that we need with climate change and this increased occurrence of nuisance flooding. And then as well, implementing these great green infrastructure retrofits and upgrades. So, not having money has always been touted as the reason why we're not doing proper stormwater management. But stormwater utilities definitely provide the mechanism by which to generate that revenue that can be utilized for stormwater management. So as per the law, and again, I've gone right into the law and I've extracted this basically, from what's in the letter of the law. The money that comes out of the stormwater utility fees. Number one, it can be used to map and document your stormwater system. And this includes catch basins, outfalls, culverts, all of that gray infrastructure, and actually purchase and utilize third-party stormwater mapping and tracking software, because a lot of public works personnel will tell you, not only do we need to know where all this stuff is, but we need to be able to track very effectively and efficiently how often have we inspected these, what type of maintenance have we conducted. So those fees can be used to map and document your stormwater system. It can be used for flood control projects. Again, something that resonates well with the community and with the town leaders. Planned or emergency replacement of failing infrastructure, a failing culvert, a failing catch basin and culvert cleaning or rehab. Again, this is something that is required by law, by MS4. All of these catch basins are supposed to be inspected and cleaned annually, inspected 4 times a year and maintained annually. That doesn't get done. We all know that doesn't get done. Identify and eliminate illicit discharges and connections. So we see this sometimes, where there's a discharge from, for instance, a septic system that has been connected to a stormwater, system. As I said before, MS4 compliance. If you're in a city like Newark or Camden, where there's still combined sewer systems, where during large storm events, that stormwater runoff mixes with wastewater and then gets sent out of the storm grates onto the streets. The money can be used to help in improving and doing away with these combined sewer overflows. And then also for public education, and then even to cover debt services and costs associated with leveraging state funding for stormwater capital improvement projects. So you can use this to help you get grant money or meet perhaps some of the match associated with grant money. Okay, so we understand how all this funding can be utilized, the benefits that can come out of it, but at the end of the day, people are still going to want to know, how much is this going to cost me? Okay, so if you look nationwide, there's a variety of different ways which these costs can be generated, or these fees can be generated. First, it can be a flat fee, which is just a fee that's charged per property owner, and it may be based on the total, in your municipality, the total amount of impervious cover. So just to use simple math, say I have 1,000 square feet of impervious cover, I have 10 property owners, each one then would have a flat fee that's associated with 100 square feet of impervious cover. More frequently, what you see is some type of tiered fee structure with caps. And I'll show you an example like on one of these bullet points. These are typically referred to as like an equivalent residential unit, an ERU. And just to give you an example, for instance, where you can have sort of like a range in various tiers with caps. Tier A may be for properties that have no impervious cover to maybe 300 square feet. Tier B, 301 to 800 square feet. I just made these numbers up, but you get a sense of how you could have this tiered approach based on an equivalent residential unit, okay? And then what is really great about the stormwater utility rules is that owners can actually be issued a credit, a fee reduction for implementing some of the measures that Chris talked about. So like on my property, I have 4 rain gardens and I have 1 dry well. I could get a credit for that because now I'm generating less runoff from my property into the street if I didn't have any of those measures in place. So that's something to keep in mind. So how do the costs get computed? Typically on what's called an ERU, an equivalent residential unit, and in many cases, credits can be issued for people that are implementing measures to decrease the amount of runoff from their property. So final slides, I'm just going to show you some examples, to give you an idea that this is not an exorbitant amount of money. So this is New Berlin, Wisconsin, one of the states that has had stormwater utilities in place for a number of years. You can see for a single family home, the average cost, is going to come out to about $60 a year, around $15 per quarter, okay? And then you can see how this is a tiered structure. This is again based on an ERU. In this case, expresses total impervious areas, and then how like 4,000 square feet in this case would be equivalent to 1 ERU. And then how that all gets divided depending on whether you're a non-residential user. So this would be like a commercial complex or a single family home owner or somebody that lives in a duplex or a condo, etc. Here's another example. This is some data that I received from Jim Cosgrove from Kleinfelder Engineering. This is in Medina, Minnesota. And here again, it's based on what would be similar to an ERU, an equivalent residential equivalency factor. So a single family residence would be issued 1 REF. And so again, you can see, typically the cost per annual cost by REF is about $30. So in Medina, Minnesota, I own a single family home. My typical stormwater utility fee on an annual scale would be about $30. And then here's another example. This is in Butner, South Carolina. Again, this is some data that was provided to me by Jim Cosgrove. The annual cost for a single family home on a 1 acre plot is about $67 per year. And their rules also provide credit for the installation of various stormwater management systems. So it could be, like the paver system that Chris showed on a driveway. It could be a rain garden again. It could be a cistern. It could be a rain barrel. You can get credit and lower your fee for implementing green infrastructure on your property. Now, DEP does provide a whole ton of guidance. You can go onto the website that specifically, deals with stormwater utilities. They will provide your community with technical assistance in creating and setting up a stormwater utility. They'll provide assistance on how to compute fees and issue credits on an equitable basis. They'll also, help you create the means to manage your assets. So, as you would expect, properties are going to change over time. You're going to get new development, you're going to get redevelopment. You want to be able to track all of that, and they'll help you, create a means to manage those assets. And then they'll also provide assistance in public education and outreach. And then eventually, a lot of this, we don't have a single stormwater utility set up in Jersey yet. But at some point, when those utilities do get created, similar to when you have a sewer utility or a water utility, or even some type of other municipal utility, there's going to have to be some type of integration with the Department of Public Affairs, DPA, and then also the Board of Public Utilities, BPU. So DEP will help your community with all of that. So how, as an environmental commission, can you get involved? Well, I think, again, having served on an environmental commission, I think our biggest job is with communication. And so we can initiate dialogue with Public Works. One of the things that I would suggest is find out, what do they see as their biggest stormwater problems? Where are they having their bigger problems? What can be done to help them to do better stormwater maintenance? What would be their wish list? Things along those lines. Also initiate dialogue with your municipal stormwater coordinator. Every municipality in New Jersey now, if you're a Tier A, particularly Tier A communities, must have a stormwater coordinator. This went into law back in 2002, 2004. Find out who your stormwater coordinator is. It typically is your township engineer. And then find out, how are we doing with MS4 compliance? What's the stormwater coordinator's position on stormwater utilities? If they're pro or con, why is that? Has any thought been given as of yet, into developing stormwater utility, or maybe, teaming up with a couple of adjacent communities, a couple of other adjacent towns to create an interlocal agreement so we can have, a stormwater utility, and then engage the public, and educate the public, and then, with that, promote and implement green infrastructure, stormwater management projects, the types of projects that, Chris discussed. So this is all stormwater utilities in action, addressing flooding, cleaning up catch basins, mapping and tracking what's been happening with, basins, VACOL, cleaning out, our catch basins, that's a stormwater utility in action. So I provided you at the end of this presentation with a number of links. First off, you can go on the NJDEP website. I think the majority of you probably received the 2021 winter report that includes a discussion about stormwater utilities. The DEP website on stormwater utilities, there's a link to that. New Jersey Future has also been promoting stormwater utilities, so I've provided the link to that. And another partner with NJDEP is New Jersey Flood Defense, their newsletter in 2019 dealing with stormwater utilities. And then the last link is to an organization up in Massachusetts that dates back to 2018, where they've been doing stormwater utilities. And they have some really nice, simple information that you would probably find helpful in communicating with your stormwater coordinator, municipal government, and the members of your community. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Randy and Liz, and I think we have some time for questions.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Steve. That's awesome. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to give right to Steve. Annette from Lawrence Township asked, what kind of administration is needed and what are the costs for implementing and managing the utility? And could it be that we could use the sewerage authority to maybe take over that management?
Yeah, I think exactly. If you already have a sewer utility and you have a sewer, commission in place, absolutely. That's like the perfect transition to get into stormwater management. And so I think in terms of, the costs and how to set things up, take advantage of the assistance that you can get from DEP. This is a new thing in New Jersey, but it's not new, as I mentioned, statewide. So I would lean on DEP to get some assistance in implementing a utility if you don't have that type of structure in place already.
Terrific, absolutely. This is maybe, I don't know who wants to answer this one, but somebody in Fairlawn says, how are municipalities handling enforcement on the new stormwater management? They have ongoing issues with runoff from construction, and the Soil Conservation District said that they rely on the municipalities to enforce. And right, exactly. So silt fences have sort of become the window dressing. And how can the EC sort of help push that enforcement?
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Chris, jump in. But I mean, this is an age-old problem. I mean, we've been dealing with this time in, time out. Kind of pass the buck, and I mean, it's really the case. And the enforcement for new development really comes down to the township engineer or whoever is the code enforcement officer. But unfortunately, what I have found is, oftentimes there's not an understanding, even now, even though we're supposed to have been doing this for like 2 decades now, 2 decades, it's insane, that this is important and it's something that needs to be done. And yeah, the silt fencing is just window dressing. The regulations actually require a heck of a lot more than silt fencing. So I think enforcement really comes, it is on a local level, but I would turn number one to the township engineer and almost simultaneously to the code enforcement officer, to make sure that these measures are, being put in place. Remember, with all new development, that's been approved by the township planning board or land use board. And there's specifics that in gaining that approval that developer, signed off on. So it's not something that can just be done willy-nilly. I mean, that's my 2 cents. But Chris, you can add, because I know you've seen this plenty of times too.
Yeah, I mean, whenever there's mud on the road, I tell people to call the Soil Conservation District, because that development is clearly in violation of their permit. The district has to issue them a permit, and they have to enforce the permit that they issue. So that's really important that you follow up with that. And these guys, they used to have inspectors who used to come out regularly. And, Stephen, I know that we knew these guys, and they would come out to the site when we build these projects, and they would see the site. And then over time, budgets got cut, the inspectors got cut. So now the guy sits in the office behind the computer all day waiting for somebody to call before they'll run outside and close down the site. They actually have the power, the Soil Conservation District has the power to shut down a site that doesn't have the proper soil erosion sediment control, and a developer could lose a lot of money because he'll be shut from construction until he fixes all that stuff. And that silt fence, yeah, that's just for show. At the bottom of that fence is supposed to be buried in the ground 6 inches. It's not supposed to be flapping in the wind like they are. And when there's water behind it, they're not supposed to be poking holes in it and letting the muddy water come through. That's not what the fence is for. So yeah, so really the district enforces that. Now the town is required to make sure that each developer is complying with the stormwater regulations. And at the end of the year, the township stormwater manager, he signs off that he's in compliance with the MS4 permit, which means he's in compliance with all the stormwater regulations. So basically he's signing an affidavit that his town has development that went in and all development is compliant with New Jersey DEP's regulations. Now DEP can come out and inspect that and challenge that. And not only can the town get fined, but that person who signs that is also personally liable.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Kristen from Madison had asked of how can ECs help educate the landscapers and the developers about these green infrastructure options? And it's sort of hard to find them sometimes, but you know.
So, I mean, it's interesting. I think as we see the new regulations that just started on March 2nd, as we see more developments going in with these practices, you're going to see more landscapers having to learn how to maintain them and how to build them. So there's already some programs out there. The Watershed Institute actually has a training program on how to maintain green infrastructure practices. The Water Environment Federation offers their certification program. It's the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program. I'm actually a trainer for that. And we're training people on how to build these practices and how to maintain the practices, and you get an official certificate for that. They take a test and everything. It's really very official. So we'll see more of that happening over time. You know, right now, if you want a contractor who can come out and build something for you, what we've been doing is going to people who have been working in the area. So if you're looking for somebody in South Jersey, you're going to call, you know, Cheryl or Randy and find out, you know, from ANJAC and say, listen, what do you guys have? Who have you been using to help build stuff? And we'll give you names from contractors we've used, and they could help you out with some of this stuff. Now, Rutgers, we actually have some funding to build some projects in several towns in the Highlands. We got funding to put a project in Belvedere, Stanhope, Bloomsbury, Sparta, and Washington Township in Warren County. We have some funding from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant, so we can build projects in those towns if they're interested. We also have money if you're one of the PVSC towns, if you're in the Passaic Valley Storage Commission service area, we have funding to do designs for you. And we can also work with PVSC, and they have a whole construction crew that's been coming out to towns and helping build these projects at schools and things like that. So if you guys are interested, please contact me. There's funding all over New Jersey that, you know, ANJAC has tapped into, that Rutgers has tapped into, to help towns build projects and get a rain garden at their library, you know, so people can see what they're at, what they look like, you know, or build one at the municipal building, or do something at the local school. You know, we're always interested in helping people. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chris, I think there's also a program that you're running with New Jersey RC&D in Hunterdon County too. That's just starting up.
So there's a rain garden rebate program. If you live in the Shannick watershed in Hunterdon County, there's a program out there. We're running one around Lake Apacon too. So if you're one of the 4 towns around Lake Apacon, and then South Jersey Land and Water Trust down in the southern part of the state, they're also running a rain garden rebate program. And we're doing a rain garden rebate program in Hamilton Township in Mercer County. So, so there's a lot of, Steve, I think I'm talking every night for the next 3 weeks about these rain gardens, but you know, so it's really, but it's great because you listen to us talk for an hour about how to design a rain garden, and then you sign up for a half-hour design session, and then an engineer and landscape architect will work with you, design a rain garden for your house. It's a great program. When you build a garden, then you actually get a rebate. Some homeowners getting as much as $450 for the rain garden they built. So it's a pretty good program, you know, encourages people to take action.
Yeah,
that's
you know, in
big
these
of a program.
programs, yeah, I mean, these rain garden programs and some of these other green infrastructure, construction efforts. I mean, again, they may seem, something that's new and novel in New Jersey, although we, again, like Chris and I have been talking about these for at least like 5 years, if not more. Like I know we, before they were called rain gardens, we were, talking about them back in 2002, 2004,
Yeah.
as bioretention systems or whatever. But you can go across the country. I mean, Philly has a tremendous amount of green infrastructure in place, and why? Because they're under a mandate to actually reduce the volume of runoff that is released from properties citywide. But they're under a mandate, and if they don't do it, they get fined. So yeah, there's you see a lot more participation in those types of programs, but it's nothing new. And I think if you deal with Chris and you can deal with Anjek, there's you can definitely get guidance that can be extended to individual contractors and landscapers, et cetera.
Yeah, Steve,
Absolutely.
there's some towns like Woodbridge, New Jersey, where they actually every year their public works guys work with us, and we help them build five rain gardens a year. And the public works guys dig it out. They have some money in their capital budget to do the work, and so they're slowly moving around the town building this. And these are public works guys who never knew what a rain garden was 3 years ago. Now, when they see a flooding problem in town, they say, hey, wait, this might be a great spot for another rain garden. And, and they're calling us up to ask us for designs. And I'm like, man, you guys even know what a rain garden was. And I was so much happier when that was the case, because it was a lot less trouble for me to do all this work. But, now they really want to do all this stuff. It's been crazy, So yeah, it's been an interesting trip these last 10, 15 years. So.
Vicky had asked, is there regulatory or certification requirements for the engineer or the municipal person who deals with the stormwater and, works with the developers? Is there a way that they have to do any training?
Well, stormwater, the municipal stormwater coordinator, is identified. Again, this is by regulation, but yeah, I mean, it can't just be somebody that says, okay, I'm going to be the, the coordinator. They do have to have training, and in most cases, I wouldn't say every case, but the majority of cases, it is going to be a professional engineer, typically, a civil that does have experience with hydrology, and so I think, yeah, you're going to have professionals that have the proper training and certifications.
Yeah, and I think part of the MS4 program requires certain people in towns to get that training, and DEP does offer some stormwater training. So I know some of the towns I'm working with, the engineer, the assistant engineer, and the head of public works all have taken that training, and they have to take it every couple of years to keep it, to keep it in compliance with the permit that they have. So.
My question was actually about the engineers who work with consultants who develop site plans and so forth, not the municipal engineer.
Oh, sorry, Vicky.
So, so what winds up happening is a consulting engineer who's doing a development in your town would be, those plans have to be signed and sealed by a professional engineer. They go to the town, and the town either has their own engineer to review those, or they subcontract with another consulting company who represents the town. So there's a lot of engineering companies throughout New Jersey, Mazer and Alimo, and a lot of these different companies that actually are town engineers too, even though they're a private company, they serve as a town engineer. So anybody reviewing those plans on behalf of the town has to have taken the training and be kind of certified to be able to review those plans. There's no requirement. I mean, anybody with a professional engineering license who can sign and seal plans can do those engineering designs for that developer and turn it in. They don't have any special training. It's understood, though, that their responsibility as a professional engineer is to only design things that they're qualified to design. So it's more of an engineering ethics thing. If they violate that, not only can they get fined, but they can lose their license. So for the part, the engineers who are doing developments, plans for developers, all have the training they need to be able to do this. Now, whether they, which is even more problematic, because sometimes you'll see engineering designs come in that don't satisfy the requirements. because if they satisfy the requirements, it's going to cost the developer a lot more. So they're trying to get it in without having to satisfy those requirements. So in some cases, it's a little bit more disheartening that, that's happening, because they know what they're supposed to do, but they're not doing it because they're trying to get around it, So we've seen that a few times. I'm on my EC in my town, and I've seen some stuff come in that I thought was a little questionable. But now they know I'm on the EC, and they know I help write some of the stormwater regs. So, so really everything that comes in is automatically right because they don't want to tear it apart. So, yeah.
I was just going to add too that, I mean, I've done a lot of development reviews, when I was with Princeton Hydro, and, and Chris will tell you, I mean, even with a simple rain garden, it's more than just digging a hole and putting some plants in, that has to be properly sized. So, the engineer that's putting their name and with their seal on those plans, they'll do a routing analysis. So they'll know like how much runoff is going to be generated, how quickly it enters that system, the size of the system, can it accommodate the amount of, the volume of runoff, and then how is that water going to leave that, that basin, whether it's a rain garden or if it's a bioretention basin or a bioretention swale, whatever. They have to go through those analyses, and then at the end of the day, the math doesn't lie. So you can check the numbers and confirm that that things are going to work properly. But as Chris mentioned, I mean, I've seen plenty of tricks that have been tried that it makes it seem like, okay, the basin is properly sized, but it's really not. And a lot of it comes down to whether the proper type of soil analysis was conducted, the depth at which those soil analyses were conducted. So there's ways to check and make sure that all of these systems are being properly constructed. And the BMP manual, New Jersey BMP manual, provides the details on how these things need to be built. As Chris mentioned, now with the new passage of the green infrastructure requirements, we're going to have these decentralized systems that now each 2.5 acres of development needs to be managed on its own. So we get away from these big, deep moon craters, on a project site, to these connected green infrastructure systems, much smaller, but they work much more effectively.
So I know next week you're going to be talking about site plan review, Liz, is that right?
Yes.
Part of the thing that I always see when plans come in is the soil testing that Steve talks about. I mean, there's an appendix in the Stormwater Best Management Practice Manual that they're supposed to follow, and a lot of guys do. But sometimes we'll see soil testing and says, "Oh, look, the infiltration rate is great here," and they did soil testing on the other side of the property where they're putting the actual filtration system. So you got to make sure the testing is done not just at the right depth and the right way, but in the right location.
Right.
You guys trying to use testing. Oh, look, well, this is close enough. Well, no, it's not. Things change from every few hundred feet on the site. There could be differences. So.
Absolutely. And this is something, an environmental commission, maybe you have a member on your EC that has some of this knowledge and that maybe they want to educate themselves. And, Chris's website, Steve is here as an asset. They can direct you to places where you can bring somebody up to speed on your commission that can do some of this more technical review. And there are other people out here that Anja can help you find people to help you look at these plans if you have an issue. So, don't give up, because you guys are the boots on the ground. Your municipality, and you guys can be pushing for these green infrastructure programs and elements in your town. You can be pushing, seeing about the stormwater utility, because that can really work well for not a lot of money. Everybody wants to call it a rain tax, and we're trying to get past that. So as you guys, community members, that can be a really good project for you guys to work on. It won't be quick. It won't happen overnight, but that's okay. Don't, and we're here and we can give you information on the resources and other things to help you do that. A lot of you are asking about the rain garden rebate programs, and I sent one link for the South Jersey one. I will definitely share the links on the other rebate programs that we have, but you can try the Rutgers Water Resources Program, because they run most of those. I will share that link and other links as well. So.
Yeah, we actually don't have one in the PVSC area right now, but we do have one in Summit that's starting.
Okay.
So that's another one that's getting started. I don't know if that's going to be rebates or just designs. Sometimes we'll do the program where we'll just design rain gardens for homeowners. We don't have money for the rebates, but we'll do the design anyway. So at least the homeowner has a really nice design that they can implement on their own. And these things don't cost a lot in a lot of cases. So a lot of people want to move forward with them anyway. They just need a really good design. So,
Terrific. Well, thank you.
And then, Liz, the other thing I would say, for environmental commissions, yes, the stormwater utilities, it's going to take some while, take some time to really develop the momentum. And we're going to have one brave town that basically implements that. But I would make, that nuisance flooding sort of like the focal point, because everybody can relate to that, and, when Chris and I start talking about phosphorus levels and problems with water quality and impairments, a lot of people's eyes roll back in their heads. But when you talk about flooding, people sit up and listen, and the other thing too, if you do have a town that has a lot of older conventional detention basins, just grass basins, Public Works will sit up and they'll listen, if you say, if you rehabilitate these as bioretention systems, now you're not spending the time every week to go out and mow those things. So there's a significant cost savings there. I think in Yardley alone, when they were looking at naturalizing some of their basins, somebody computed it was $100,000 savings by naturalizing those basins. Yes, they still need maintenance. It's a different type of maintenance, but they saved themselves a ton of time and money, and those public works personnel could be utilized elsewhere during the spring, summer, and early fall, doing other types of projects other than just mowing. So I think those are the two things that I would really push: flooding, and then you're saving or spreading out and allowing your public works personnel to work more efficiently and more effectively in addressing or maintaining even some of the conventional stormwater features, culverts and pipes and things like that, that need maintenance in a town.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you go in as the Environmental Commission and say, I have a great way to save some money and also to help, all these neighbors that are complaining about flooding. I mean, that's going to get more than hearing about the native plants and the pollinator gardens, unfortunately. The fact that it's going to be a pollinator garden and only have native plants in it is a bonus, and people will appreciate that once it's built. But when they're just looking at a concrete thing, they want to know that you're going to stop the flooding. That's, perfect. Thank you, Steve. And thank you so much, Chris and Steve, for being with us this morning. Randy, thank you. It was terrific. We will share the recording of this as well as the presentations with everybody, as well as the chat transcript, which has a lot of links and stuff in there for you. It might not happen today, but you'll get it by Monday or Tuesday. And again, if you missed any part of this presentation and you want to join us again on Tuesday evening at 7 p.m., we're going to be having a similar presentation, different speakers, but similar presentation. So we want to thank everybody for spending your Saturday morning with us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Good job. Thank you.